I came to America with exactly $42 in my pocket and zero connections. Today, I own 3 businesses worth over $2 million. These are the exact words of one of the American dreamers that you are about to learn about. What's their secret? It's not what you think. In the next few minutes, we're going to reveal the hidden wealth-building strategies that immigrants use, tactics you won't find in any finance book. These aren't get-rich-quick schemes, but powerful methods that have helped thousands build wealth from nothing. The $42 story. Meet our immigrant wealth heroes. Have you ever wondered how someone can arrive in a new country with less money than it costs to fill up your gas tank and still build $1 million business? It sounds like something from a fairy tale, but for thousands of immigrants who come to America every year, this is their reality. Let me introduce you to 3 remarkable people who turned pocket change into serious wealth, and did it without following any of the typical financial advice you hear about. Meet Minh Nguyen. When she fled Vietnam in 1979, all she had was $42 sewn into the lining of her jacket. Today, she owns Southern Spice Distribution, a food business worth over $2 million that supplies Asian ingredients to restaurants across 3 states. But her journey wasn't just about overcoming poverty. It was about facing obstacles that would make most of us quit on day one. When Mai arrived in California, she couldn't even ask for directions in English. Imagine trying to open a bank account when you can't understand the forms, or applying for jobs when you can't read the applications. I learn 5 new English words every day, Mai told me. First words I learn: job, work, money, food, thank you. But language barriers were just the beginning. Without a credit history, Mai was basically invisible to the financial system. No credit cards, no loans, no apartment leases. And then there was the discrimination, being told to go back to your country, while standing in line at the grocery store, or having potential landlords suddenly claim apartments were already rented when they saw her face. Mai's first job in America paid $3 an hour washing dishes at a Chinese restaurant. After a 12-hour shift, she'd walk 2 miles back to the 1-bedroom apartment she shared with 6 family members. I sleep on floor next to kitchen for 3 years, she explained. Every night I count my money and think about how to make more tomorrow. Then there's Raj Patel from Gujarat, India. He landed at JFK Airport in 1995 with $87, a computer science degree, and not a single professional connection. You'd think the degree would have been his golden ticket, but American employers wouldn't recognize his credentials. They looked at my resume like it was written in a foreign language, Raj recalled. One interviewer actually asked if computers in India were the same as in America. Despite the setbacks, Raj now runs NextGen Tech Solutions, a consulting firm valued at $1.5 million with clients including several Fortune 500 companies. How did he get from point A to point B without the network most successful tech entrepreneurs rely on? That's where the story gets interesting. And we can't forget Maria Gonzalez, who crossed the border from Mexico in 2001 with just $56 and a dream of creating security for her family. She couldn't even afford a bus ticket to her cousin's house, so she walked 17 miles on her first day in America. Today, Maria owns a real estate portfolio worth $3.2 million, 6 properties across 2 states that generate enough passive income to support her entire extended family. When I clean houses, I look at how people live, Maria said. I notice what makes nice home, how much things cost, where neighborhoods are growing. I'm not just cleaning, I'm learning about American real estate every day. What's fascinating about these 3 success stories is the common thread running through them. None of them built wealth the traditional American way. They didn't max out 401k, or follow the standard advice about starting with emergency funds or focusing on their credit scores. In fact, they couldn't. The traditional financial system wasn't designed for people in their position. I couldn't get a bank loan even after 2 years of perfect payment history on everything else. Raj's first credit card had a $200 limit with a $100 annual fee. Maria couldn't even open a checking account without a social security number for her first 3 years in America. So what did they do instead? They tapped into something far more powerful than traditional financial tools. They leveraged wealth-building methods that have been used in their home countries for generations. Methods that don't require good credit, don't demand perfect English, and don't need expensive financial advisors. Mai found a way to raise $10,000 for her first food stall without ever talking to a banker. Raj built a professional network from absolute zero, turning cultural gatherings into career opportunities. And Maria bought her first property years before her American-born co-workers, despite earning the same modest income. These aren't just heartwarming stories of perseverance, though they're definitely that too. They're masterclasses in alternative wealth creation, packed with strategies that anyone, immigrant or not, can use to build financial security, even when the traditional paths seem closed. What's most surprising is that these immigrants didn't succeed despite their cultural backgrounds. They succeeded because of them. The very things that made them seem disadvantaged in American society contained hidden financial superpowers that most native-born Americans never discover. In Vietnam, Mai had learned about ancient community banking systems that predate Western financial institutions by centuries. Raj brought with him the Indian tradition of professional networking that turns social connections into business opportunities. And Maria applied Mexican family economics principles that allow whole communities to build wealth together rather than individually. Americans think you need money to make money, Mai told me with a smile. In Vietnam, we know you need people to make money. Money comes later. Each of these wealth heroes found themselves caught between two worlds, the traditions of their homelands and the requirements of their new country. But instead of simply assimilating and adopting American financial practices, they created something much more powerful. Hybrid strategies that combined the best of both worlds. They took ancient practices that had been tested over generations in their home countries and adapted them to the American economic landscape. The results were financial pathways that most financial advisors never talk about, because most financial advisors have never had to build wealth starting from absolute zero. When you have nothing, Raj explained, you see opportunities that comfortable people miss. Necessity makes you creative. Being an outsider lets you question systems that insiders take for granted. As I spent time with Mai, Raj, and Maria, I realized they weren't just building businesses or investing in properties. They were creating entirely new wealth formulas that defied conventional financial wisdom while producing extraordinary results. And here's what you need to understand. Their methods weren't just good enough alternatives to traditional financial strategies. In many cases, they were actually superior, producing faster results with less risk and greater resilience during economic downturns. The Rotating Credit Association, banking without banks. When traditional banks wouldn't give Mai a chance, she turned to a financial system that predates modern banking by centuries. While Americans might view banking as a complex system of credit scores and loan applications, immigrants like Mai tap into something far more powerful, community trust. And the results? They're nothing short of remarkable. After 7 banks rejected Mai's loan applications despite her detailed business plan and food expertise, she faced a critical decision. Without the capital to start her food stall, her dream would remain just that, a dream. But Mai had access to something most Americans have never heard of, a hui. When no bank would help me, I remembered how my mother and aunties handled money back home, Mai explained. In Vietnam, we don't wait for permission from banks to start a business. A hui is essentially a rotating savings and credit association, ROSCA, that Vietnamese communities have relied on for thousands of years. The concept is brilliantly simple, yet incredibly effective. In Mai's case, 10 community members each contributed $1,000 monthly to create a collective pot of $10,000. Each month, one member receives the entire pot, creating an instant injection of capital without the red tape of traditional banking. The beauty of this system is that it operates entirely on trust. No credit checks, no collateral requirements, no interest payments. Instead, something far more powerful enforces repayment, your reputation within the community. Missing your payment isn't just a financial problem, it's a social catastrophe, Mai explained. Your family would lose face, your children would be affected, your standing in the community would be destroyed. That's why almost nobody defaults. When Mai's turn came to receive the pot, she immediately invested the full $10,000 in restaurant equipment and initial inventory for her first food stall. While her American counterparts might have spent months or years trying to build credit to qualify for a high-interest business loan, Mai was already serving customers and generating income. What's fascinating is that these community banking systems aren't unique to Vietnamese culture. They exist across immigrant communities with different names but similar structures. Tandas in Mexican communities, susus among West African immigrants, and chit funds in Indian circles. Each operates on the same principle of collective financial power and social accountability. The most mind-blowing part? These informal, financial systems consistently achieve repayment rates between 95–98%, significantly outperforming many traditional banks and credit card companies. Why? Because social capital creates far stronger incentives than legal contracts ever could. Think about it. If you miss a credit card payment, you might damage your credit score. If you miss a Hui payment, you damage your standing in your entire community, potentially affecting your children's opportunities and your family's reputation for generations. The stakes are exponentially higher. This system also creates unique advantages beyond just accessing capital. Members develop deep networks of mutual support, share business advice informally during meetings, and often become each other's first customers. The Hui doesn't just provide money, it provides an entire ecosystem for entrepreneurial success. For immigrants like Mai who operate without the safety net of generational wealth or established credit, these systems turn their greatest perceived disadvantage, being outside the traditional banking system, into a surprising strength. What Americans see as primitive or risky, we see as reliable and human, Mai noted. Banks need paperwork to trust you. In our community, we trust each other because we know each other. The system isn't without challenges. Operating outside formal banking regulations means these associations lack certain protections. If a member truly cannot pay due to emergency, the group must absorb that loss collectively. However, the tight social bonds typically mean members work together to cover temporary hardships rather than allowing defaults. What's particularly interesting is how the Hui adapts to American life. Back in Vietnam, participants might contribute smaller amounts weekly. In America, where members typically earn more but have higher expenses, the contributions grow larger and often shift to monthly cycles. The fundamental principles remain unchanged, but the execution evolves to match economic realities. Mai's experience reveals something critically important. Financial inclusion doesn't always have to come from traditional institutions. Sometimes, communities create their own solutions that work better than the mainstream alternatives. When I got my $10,000, I didn't just receive money, Mai explained. I received the collective belief of 9 other people who trusted me to succeed. That's something no bank loan could ever provide. For immigrant entrepreneurs, these systems offer a fascinating hack around one of America's biggest barriers to wealth creation: the credit system that often excludes newcomers regardless of their actual reliability or business acumen. When traditional doors remain closed, immigrants simply build their own doors. The implications go far beyond individual success stories. These systems demonstrate that financial trust doesn't have to be mediated by complex scoring algorithms, extensive documentation, or high interest rates. Perhaps the sophisticated Western banking system has something to learn from these ancient approaches to community finance. As traditional banking evolved toward impersonal relationships mediated by credit scores and automated systems, something valuable was lost: the human element of financial relationships. In Hui systems, members look each other in the eye, understand each other's dreams, and hold each other accountable in ways no computer algorithm ever could. This also explains why these systems thrive particularly well in immigrant communities, where social bonds are often stronger due to shared experiences, cultural connections, and the necessity of supporting each other in a new country. When your community is your safety net, you protect that community at all costs. What's most remarkable about Mai's story isn't just that she found an alternative to traditional banking. It's that she found a superior alternative. One that provided capital faster, with zero interest, minimal paperwork, and built-in community support for her business venture. The Hui doesn't just work despite lacking the sophisticated trappings of modern banking. It works because it lacks them, replacing complexity with simplicity and bureaucracy with human relationships. Network arbitrage, creating professional connections from scratch. While Mai leveraged community trust to secure funding, there's another invisible asset immigrants exploit that's even more powerful in certain situations. What happens when you arrive in America with plenty of skills, but absolutely zero professional connections? For Raj, this seemingly impossible obstacle became his greatest opportunity through a strategic approach I call network arbitrage. The traditional American job hunting playbook promises that with the right resume and enough applications, qualified candidates will eventually land interviews. But Raj quickly discovered the painful reality that many immigrants face. Skills alone aren't enough. After submitting over 200 online applications to tech companies, his impressive engineering background netted him just 3 interviews and 0 job offers. The digital application system was a black hole that swallowed his credentials without a trace. I realized I was playing a game designed for people who already had connections, Raj later explained. The online application system isn't built for outsiders. What makes this situation particularly frustrating is that Raj wasn't lacking in technical abilities. He had the engineering skills companies needed. What he lacked was a way to showcase those skills to decision-makers who could actually hire him. This invisible barrier separating qualified immigrants from employment opportunities is rarely discussed in conventional career advice. This is where network arbitrage comes in, a strategy that transforms cultural connections into professional opportunities. Unlike traditional networking, which often feels transactional, network arbitrage leverages the natural bonds that form within cultural communities to create genuine relationships that can open professional doors. Raj's breakthrough came when he shifted his focus from submitting online applications to becoming an active participant in his local Indian community. He began volunteering at cultural events organized by the Indian Association in his city. Instead of directly asking for job leads, he simply showed up consistently, helping with everything from setup to cleanup. Each event became an opportunity to meet established Indian professionals already working in the tech industry. His approach was systematic and patient. During these cultural gatherings, Raj would listen carefully to conversations, noting which attendees worked at technology companies. Rather than immediately asking for job referrals, he built authentic relationships first. He'd engage people in discussions about their work, asking thoughtful questions about technical challenges their companies faced. The magic of Raj's strategy was in how he created value before requesting anything in return. When he discovered the community center's website was outdated and difficult to navigate, he offered to rebuild it for free. This small project showcased his technical abilities in a tangible way while providing a genuine service to the community. Word spread quickly about the talented engineer who had modernized the community website. Raj didn't stop there. He began offering free coding lessons to the children of community members, teaching basic programming skills every Saturday morning. Parents who worked in tech companies watched as their children developed new skills under Raj's guidance. These simple acts of service built his reputation as both technically competent and personally trustworthy, 2 qualities essential for job referrals. In India, we have a saying that translates roughly to first give, then receive, Raj explained. I wasn't strategically calculating each interaction. I was simply following the principles I grew up with. Contribute to your community first, and the community will support you in return. The contrast with his previous approach couldn't have been starker. Instead of being one faceless resume among hundreds, Raj became a known entity with proven skills and personal relationships. When a senior engineer from his community mentioned an opening at his company, the recommendation came with personal credibility. He's not just good with code, he's been teaching my daughter programming for months. He's the real deal. That warm introduction led to Raj's first interview at a promising tech startup, where he was hired within a week. The hiring manager later admitted that they typically didn't consider candidates without U.S. work experience, but the personal recommendation had convinced them to make an exception. What makes network arbitrage such a powerful strategy is that it transforms the very disadvantages immigrants face into strengths. The same cultural differences that sometimes create barriers in mainstream professional settings become bonds within cultural communities. These communities function as powerful professional networks precisely because they're built on something stronger than mere professional convenience. They're built on shared experiences, cultural understanding, and mutual support. This approach works across virtually all immigrant communities. Vietnamese entrepreneurs find suppliers through community connections. Mexican immigrants secure their first construction jobs through hometown networks. Nigerian professionals mentor newly arrived countrymen navigating corporate America. The effectiveness of network arbitrage highlights a fascinating paradox in American professional culture. While the system theoretically values meritocracy, in practice, relationships often matter more than qualifications alone. Immigrants who recognize this reality and strategically build community connections can bypass traditional gatekeepers. What's particularly remarkable about Raj's story is that he didn't just use network arbitrage to land his first job. He continued using this approach throughout his career. When he later launched his own consulting business, his first clients came from relationships he built within the Indian community. His reputation for technical excellence and personal integrity had become his most valuable professional asset. The lessons from Raj's experience extend beyond immigrant communities. In today's hyper-connected but paradoxically isolated professional landscape, the ability to build genuine community relationships has become a rare and valuable skill. While most professionals focus on expanding their LinkedIn connections, those who invest in deeper community ties often find more meaningful opportunities. For job seekers from any background, Raj's approach offers a powerful alternative to the soul-crushing cycle of online applications. Find communities where you can contribute genuine value. Build relationships based on shared interests rather than professional utility. Demonstrate your skills through helpful actions rather than just claiming them on a resume. The subtle genius of network arbitrage is that it doesn't require special connections or privileged access to work. It simply requires a willingness to shift focus from impersonal systems to human relationships. In Raj's case, cultural community provided the context, but collective economics, how group purchasing creates individual wealth. While Raj turned social connections into career opportunities, Maria faced a completely different challenge: achieving homeownership on a housekeeper's salary. The math didn't just look difficult, it looked impossible. Financial experts calculated that someone in Maria's position would need 23 years of consistent saving just to afford a down payment on a modest home. But Maria didn't resign herself to this timeline. Instead, she tapped into a collective strategy that compressed decades of wealth building into mere months. "I remember looking at the numbers and feeling sick," Maria once told me. "Even if I saved every extra dollar, I'd be nearly 50 before I could buy even the smallest house in my neighborhood." This realization could have crushed her dreams, but instead, it pushed her toward an alternative approach that many Mexican-American families have used for generations. Rather than pursuing the traditional American path of individual homeownership, Maria organized a property investment collective with 5 family members. The setup was brilliantly simple. Each person contributed $200 monthly to a shared fund. While this amount might seem modest, the combined $1,200 monthly quickly accumulated into something substantial. Within just 18 months, a fraction of the 23 years Maria would have needed on her own, the group had saved enough for a down payment on their first property. They strategically targeted a fixer-upper that banks considered high risk, but that they knew had potential. The property needed significant work, but that's where the collective model really showed its genius. Instead of hiring contractors, the family members divided responsibilities based on their individual skills. Maria's uncle, who had years of construction experience back in Mexico, handled all major repairs. Her cousin, who worked in an accounting office, managed the financial aspects, tracking expenses, handling tax documents, and keeping detailed records of each member's contributions. Maria herself took on coordination of rental matters once they began acquiring additional properties. "We turned what Americans see as a disadvantage, multiple families living together, into our biggest financial advantage," Maria explained. The group lived together in their first property while renovating it, allowing them to avoid paying rent elsewhere while simultaneously improving their investment. The shared living arrangement meant shared expenses, which enabled them to continue building their collective fund even after making their first purchase. After completing renovations, the property's value increased substantially. This equity growth became the foundation for their next strategic move. Rather than each taking a cut of the profits, they leveraged the equity to secure financing for a second property. This snowball effect continued as they repeated the process, transforming one modest investment into multiple properties. What makes this collective economics model particularly powerful is how it formalizes arrangements that might otherwise lead to conflict. The group created a limited liability company, LLC, to hold their properties, providing legal protection while establishing clear ownership percentages based on contributions. This structure addressed common concerns about collective ownership, such as what happens if someone wants to exit the arrangement. The impact of this approach on wealth timelines is staggering. In traditional models, individual homebuyers must save for decades before purchasing a single property. Through collective economics, Maria's family compressed that timeline dramatically, acquiring their first property in just 18 months. Even more impressive, they expanded their portfolio from 1 property to 5 within a decade, a pace of growth that would be virtually impossible for a single minimum wage earner. The secret isn't just pooling money, Maria noted. It's pooling skills, knowledge, and responsibilities. Each family member contributed beyond their financial investment, creating a multiplier effect on their collective resources. When maintenance issues arose, they didn't need to hire expensive contractors. When rental decisions needed to be made, they had built-in advisors. This comprehensive resource sharing created efficiencies that individual investors rarely achieve. The model has gained such traction that formal structures have emerged to support it. Community land trusts, CLTs, now provide legal frameworks for collective ownership, especially in immigrant communities. In Minneapolis, for example, the City of Lakes Community Land Trust has developed specialized mortgage products designed specifically for undocumented households, recognizing the powerful economic potential of these collective arrangements. This approach to property ownership reflects a fundamentally different cultural understanding of wealth. While American financial advice typically focuses on individual asset accumulation, collective economics recognizes that shared resources can create accelerated pathways to prosperity. The model doesn't just provide financial benefits. It strengthens community bonds and creates support systems that extend beyond monetary value. When one family member succeeds, we all succeed, Maria explained. And when we face challenges, we face them together. This shared stake in outcomes creates powerful incentives for collaboration and mutual support. The model also provides built-in accountability, as each member's actions affect the entire group's financial well-being. For Maria, collective economics wasn't just about acquiring properties. It was about transforming her family's economic trajectory. Children growing up within these arrangements witness wealth building firsthand, absorbing financial knowledge that typically requires formal education to acquire. They see adults collaborating on budgets, making investment decisions, and managing properties, experiences that shape their own financial mindsets. The approach isn't without challenges. American banking systems and legal structures are designed primarily for individual property ownership, creating hurdles for collective arrangements. Maria's group needed to educate themselves on legal entities, property rights, and tax implications, knowledge that wasn't readily accessible in their community. To address these gaps, they connected with a community organization that provided workshops on forming LLCs and managing shared assets. This education component proved crucial to their success, highlighting how financial knowledge must complement financial strategies. Without understanding the legal frameworks, even the best collective model could collapse under administrative challenges. While collective economics offers tremendous benefits, it requires careful implementation. Clear agreements about contributions, responsibilities, and profit distribution are essential. Maria's group created detailed written agreements outlining how decisions would be made, how profits would be shared, and how disputes would be resolved. These agreements transformed cultural practices into legally sound arrangements that could withstand challenges. The model also requires a longer-term perspective than most American financial planning embraces. Members must commit to the collective vision for years, sometimes delaying individual gratification for group benefit. This mindset shift represents perhaps the biggest challenge for those raised in more individualistic financial cultures. Yet the results speak for themselves. Maria's collective approach compressed what would have been a 23-year saving period into just 18 months for their first property. Over a decade, they expanded to 5 properties worth a combined $3.2 million. The acceleration of wealth creation through this model challenges conventional financial wisdom about what's possible for minimum wage earners. The immigrant mindset: 3 psychological advantages for wealth building. The acceleration of Maria's wealth creation isn't just about clever financial strategies. It's powered by something even more fundamental. What if I told you that immigrants possess 3 psychological frameworks that act like hidden wealth-building superpowers? These mental models aren't taught in any finance class, yet they consistently help newcomers build fortunes while others struggle paycheck to paycheck. When we examine immigrant success stories across different cultures and time periods, a fascinating pattern emerges. Beyond the practical tactics of rotating credit associations, network arbitrage, and collective economics lies something even more powerful. A distinct psychological approach to wealth creation that transcends cultural boundaries. This isn't just about grit or hustle, though those certainly play a role. It's about specific mental frameworks that create financial advantages in ways many native-born Americans never develop. Let's break down these 3 psychological superpowers that give immigrant wealth builders their edge. The first advantage is what psychologists call the long-term perspective. While many Americans plan their finances around quarterly goals or yearly bonuses, immigrant entrepreneurs typically approach wealth building with a multi-decade vision. Research shows this isn't just a cultural preference. It's a strategic advantage that fundamentally changes how they make financial decisions. Mai's business journey perfectly illustrates this perspective in action. When her distribution company started generating profit, she faced a crucial decision point. Most small business owners would have immediately increased their personal compensation to enjoy the fruits of their labor. But Mai took a radically different approach. She reinvested 90% of her profits back into the business for 7 consecutive years. This wasn't because she couldn't use the money personally. It was because her decision-making framework was calibrated to a 10-year horizon, not next month's rent. When considering equipment purchases, she evaluated them not on immediate return, but on their potential value a decade into the future. This long-term perspective created compound growth that simply wouldn't have been possible with short-term thinking. This approach isn't unique to Mai. Studies of immigrant entrepreneurs consistently show they make financial decisions based on outcomes projected over decades rather than months. This contrasts dramatically with the more immediate financial planning often seen in typical American financial psychology, where quarterly returns and annual income milestones frequently drive decision-making. The second psychological advantage is what I call the abundance through scarcity mindset. This might sound like a contradiction, but it's actually a powerful framework for innovation and problem-solving that emerges specifically from resource constraints. Raj's experience building his tech consultancy demonstrates this principle perfectly. When establishing his business, he couldn't afford industry-standard software development tools that cost thousands of dollars. Instead of seeing this as a limitation, his resource constraints forced him to become proficient with open-source alternatives. This seeming disadvantage ultimately became a major competitive advantage. While his competitors were locked into expensive proprietary systems, Raj's team developed expertise in flexible, customizable solutions that actually better served their clients' needs. Their scarcity-driven innovation didn't just save money. It created a genuine market differentiation that attracted clients who wanted more adaptable solutions. This pattern of turning resource limitations into strategic advantages appears consistently in immigrant business success stories. Scarcity doesn't just teach frugality. It forces creative thinking that often leads to better approaches than the standard resource-intensive methods. This mindset allows immigrant entrepreneurs to leverage their unique backgrounds and experiences to create competitive advantages rather than seeing limitations as barriers. The third and perhaps most powerful psychological framework is the community-first approach. While American financial culture often emphasizes individual achievement and personal wealth accumulation, immigrant wealth builders typically view personal success as inseparable from community prosperity. Maria's property collective demonstrates this mindset in action. Her focus wasn't solely on building personal wealth. She approached property investment as a vehicle for elevating her entire family network. By prioritizing the collective's financial health, she actually accelerated her own wealth creation far beyond what would have been possible through individual effort. This wasn't just about pooling money. The community-first approach created synergies where each member's contribution became more valuable within the collective context. Maria's uncle's construction skills, her cousin's financial management abilities, and her own talent for coordination created a wealth-building engine greater than the sum of its parts. Research confirms this isn't merely a cultural trait, but a strategic advantage. A community-first approach fosters collaboration and mutual support, enhancing overall economic resilience. When financial setbacks occurred, the collective could absorb and distribute the impact rather than letting it derail an individual's progress. What's particularly fascinating about these 3 psychological frameworks, long-term perspective, abundance through scarcity mindset, and community-first approach, is that they work together to create a wealth-building system greater than any single component. The long-term perspective provides the patience needed for community investments to mature. The scarcity mindset generates innovative solutions that maximize limited community resources. And the community orientation creates the support system needed to maintain a long-term vision despite short-term challenges. These frameworks also address what psychologists identify as significant emotional and psychological barriers to wealth creation. For example, the migratory grief that many immigrants experience, the profound sense of loss that comes with leaving one's homeland, is often counterbalanced by the supportive community networks they create. This emotional resilience translates directly into financial resilience. Similarly, immigrants often maintain what researchers call aspirational capital, the ability to hold on to hopes and dreams despite significant barriers. This psychological resource drives their commitment to education and economic advancement for their children, creating powerful motivators for wealth creation that extend beyond personal comfort. Perhaps most importantly, immigrants typically develop a growth mindset, viewing challenges as opportunities for learning rather than as fixed barriers. This perspective allows them to approach financial obstacles with curiosity and determination rather than defeat. When banks rejected Mai's loan applications, she didn't see it as a final verdict on her business potential. She saw it as an invitation to find alternative funding methods. The good news is that these psychological frameworks aren't genetic traits or cultural inheritances that can't be learned. They're strategic mental models that anyone can adopt with practice and intention. You don't need to emigrate to a new country to develop a long-term perspective, find innovation in scarcity, or build wealth through community. In fact, many successful American entrepreneurs and investors have independently developed similar mindsets. Warren Buffett's famous long-term investment philosophy mirrors the immigrant's multi-decade perspective. Steve Jobs' innovation at Apple emerged partly from resource constraints in the company's early days. And many successful investment clubs demonstrate the power of community-based wealth building. Skill arbitrage, turning cultural knowledge into income. Beyond the mindset advantages we've discussed, immigrants often possess another wealth-building secret that many Americans completely overlook. What if that language you speak at home, those traditional recipes you learned as a child, or even your understanding of another culture could actually double or triple your income? Welcome to the world of skill arbitrage, where knowledge you might take for granted can become your most valuable financial asset. Most immigrants arrive in America with a toolbox of skills and knowledge they don't initially recognize as valuable. They're too busy focusing on what they lack: English fluency, American credentials, or professional connections. But hidden within their cultural background lies untapped market potential that can dramatically transform their earning capacity. Consider Mai's journey from kitchen worker to culinary entrepreneur. While working as a line cook making just $12 an hour, she couldn't see how valuable her traditional Vietnamese cooking techniques actually were. It wasn't until a restaurant customer asked about her authentic spring roll preparation that Mai realized Americans would pay premium prices for cultural knowledge she had absorbed since childhood. That simple realization led her to test the waters by offering a cooking class at a local community center. The results: her unique cultural knowledge commanded $75 per hour, more than 6 times her previous hourly wage. This pattern repeats across immigrant communities. Raj discovered that his multilingual abilities, skills he initially viewed as a liability when struggling with English, became his greatest professional asset. By positioning himself as an international project manager who could navigate both American and Indian business contexts, he effectively doubled his income. His ability to understand cultural nuances in communication styles, business expectations, and relationship building across borders created value that monolingual professionals simply couldn't match. Maria's story demonstrates yet another dimension of skill arbitrage. Her intimate understanding of Latino housing preferences, from multi-generational living arrangements to specific architectural details valued in her community, allowed her to become a specialized real estate consultant. She recognized that Latino homebuyers often sought properties with features that mainstream real estate agents overlooked: separate entrances for extended family, larger kitchen spaces for community gatherings, and proximity to cultural hubs. By leveraging this cultural insight, Maria carved out a specialized niche that dramatically increased her commission rates. The power of skill arbitrage lies in its uniqueness. When you leverage cultural knowledge that few others possess in your market, you create value that can't be easily replicated or outsourced. This explains why statistics show that individuals who successfully leverage their cultural skills often see income increases ranging from 50% to 300% compared to those who don't. But how can you identify your own potential for skill arbitrage? Start by taking inventory of what you know that others might find valuable. First, assess your cultural knowledge. Do you understand traditions, celebrations, food preparation, or social norms from a culture that has market value in America? Many immigrants discount this knowledge because it feels ordinary to them, when in fact, it's precisely this authenticity that creates market value. Second, evaluate your language skills. Beyond simple translation, do you understand the nuances, idioms, and cultural contexts that allow for meaningful cross-cultural communication? This depth of understanding is increasingly valuable in a globalized economy. Third, consider your international perspective. Your ability to compare different approaches to business, education, healthcare, or other systems gives you insights that can lead to innovation. This comparative thinking is highly valued in consulting, education, and corporate environments. Finally, look for niche expertise you've developed. Perhaps you understand traditional healing practices, craft techniques, or agricultural methods that have applications in American markets. Once you've identified potential skill arbitrage opportunities, you need to test market demand before making major career changes. Start small, offer a workshop, create a simple digital product, or propose a specialized service to a current employer. These low-risk tests allow you to gauge interest and refine your offering before making significant investments. Mai started with a single cooking class before developing her full curriculum. Raj began by volunteering to help with international clients at his company before formally proposing a new position. Maria tested her specialized real estate approach with just 3 clients before marketing herself as a cultural housing specialist. When packaging your cultural knowledge for the market, focus on the problems you solve rather than just the skills you offer. Mai didn't just teach cooking. She helped busy professionals impress dinner guests with authentic international cuisine. Raj didn't just translate. He prevented costly miscommunications in high-value international partnerships. Maria didn't just sell houses. She helped families find homes that supported their cultural values and lifestyle needs. It's also important to recognize that skill arbitrage isn't about exploiting culture. It's about creating genuine value through cross-cultural understanding. The most successful immigrants in this space approach their cultural knowledge with respect, authenticity, and a commitment to building bridges rather than simply profiting from differences. For many immigrants, the journey to recognizing the value of their cultural knowledge takes time. They often need external validation, like Mai's curious customer or Raj's impressed colleague, before they can see the market potential of what they already know. But once that realization clicks, it can transform their economic trajectory overnight. The beauty of skill arbitrage is that it doesn't require expensive credentials or years of additional training. It leverages knowledge you already possess, but repackages it for markets where that knowledge is scarce and valuable. This approach allows immigrants to bypass many traditional barriers to higher income, discrimination, credential recognition issues, and network limitations. What makes skill arbitrage particularly powerful is that these cultural skills create what economists call mode advantages, competitive edges that others can't easily reproduce. While technical skills can be learned from books or courses, authentic cultural knowledge is acquired through lived experience. The power of delayed gratification, building wealth through strategic sacrifice. Those mode advantages create unique earning opportunities, but there's an equally powerful wealth-building secret hiding in plain sight. And it's not about what immigrants earn, but what they're willing to temporarily sacrifice. The financial impact of strategic deprivation is staggering, often cutting decades off the journey to financial independence compared to conventional American approaches. Behind every immigrant success story lies a period of intentional hardship that most Americans would find unbearable. But this approach isn't about suffering for suffering's sake. It's mathematical strategy in action. When immigrants make seemingly extreme lifestyle sacrifices, they're not being needlessly frugal. They're making calculated decisions that dramatically accelerate their wealth timelines. Take the financial barriers many immigrants face when they first arrive. Without established credit histories, many struggle to access traditional loans and financial services that most Americans take for granted. Instead of giving up, they adapt by developing rigorous saving and budgeting habits that form the foundation of their wealth-building journey. Research shows immigrants prioritize saving at significantly higher rates than native-born Americans. They're not just saving spare change. They're systematically creating monthly spending plans and adhering to them with remarkable discipline. This isn't merely about being thrifty. It's about transforming financial obstacles into wealth-building opportunities. What's particularly fascinating is how these financial sacrifices compound over time. Consider housing costs, typically the largest expense in anyone's budget. While many Americans prioritize personal space and privacy, immigrants often make radical housing choices that free up enormous capital for investments. For instance, many immigrants accept shared housing arrangements that would make most Americans uncomfortable. Living with extended family or multiple roommates isn't just a cultural preference. It's a wealth-building tactic that can literally save hundreds of thousands of dollars over several years. These arrangements allow them to allocate substantial portions of their income towards savings and investments rather than rent. This concept of delayed gratification runs deep in immigrant communities. Research confirms that many immigrants willingly accept short-term hardships to achieve long-term financial gains. Rather than viewing these sacrifices as deprivation, they see them as investments in their future prosperity. The psychological impact of migration often creates a heightened sense of financial responsibility. Having left behind everything familiar, many immigrants feel an intense drive to ensure their sacrifices weren't made in vain. This motivation powers their ability to maintain extraordinary saving rates of 50%, 60%, or even 70% of their income, rates that seem impossible to most Americans accustomed to spending the majority of what they earn. But these sacrifices aren't random or motivated by fear. They're strategically targeted at expenses that deliver the highest return on investment. Immigrants distinguish between high ROI sacrifices, housing, transportation, dining, and low ROI sacrifices, basic healthcare, essential education, critical networking. They understand that penny pinching on everything leads to burnout, while strategic sacrifices in specific categories create sustainable paths to wealth. So what does this sacrificial approach look like in practice? Consider transportation choices. While many Americans view car ownership as non-negotiable, many immigrants opt for public transportation, carpooling, or purchasing much older vehicles outright. The savings from avoiding car payments, expensive insurance, and rapid depreciation can add up to tens of thousands of dollars over just a few years. Food spending represents another area where strategic sacrifice yields substantial returns. Cooking at home rather than dining out, buying ingredients in bulk, and meal prepping aren't just health choices. They're wealth-building tactics that can free up hundreds of dollars monthly for investment. Even leisure and entertainment undergo strategic evaluation. Rather than spending on costly activities, many immigrant communities create their own entertainment through family gatherings, community events, and low-cost recreational activities. These choices maintain social connections while preserving capital for wealth building. The power of these strategic sacrifices becomes evident when we examine community-based financial practices. Many immigrants participate in rotating savings and credit associations, ROSCAs, pooling resources to help each member achieve financial goals faster than they could individually. These arrangements require trust and commitment, but accelerate wealth-building timelines dramatically. What's particularly impressive is how immigrants maintain these disciplined approaches even as their incomes grow. While lifestyle inflation is common among native-born Americans who increase spending as their earnings rise, many immigrants maintain their frugal habits despite higher incomes, creating an even larger gap between earnings and expenses that can be directed toward investments. This approach allows immigrants to build emergency funds more quickly, providing financial stability that protects their wealth-building journey from being derailed by unexpected expenses. Research confirms that immigrants often maintain higher emergency savings than native-born Americans at similar income levels. The question for most Americans isn't whether they could make similar sacrifices, it's whether they're willing to. The stark contrast between immigrant wealth-building approaches and typical American consumption patterns highlights a fundamental difference in priorities. While Americans often prioritize immediate comfort and status, immigrants frequently prioritize long-term financial security over short-term conveniences. However, it's important to recognize that these sacrifices aren't without costs. Living in crowded conditions can create stress and reduce privacy. Working multiple jobs simultaneously can lead to exhaustion. Limiting social activities to save money can sometimes reduce networking opportunities. The key is identifying which sacrifices offer the highest return with the lowest negative impact on your overall well-being and goals. To implement strategic sacrifice effectively, start by tracking your current spending patterns to identify your largest expense categories. Then calculate the potential savings from making significant changes in these areas. Next, determine how long you're willing to maintain these sacrifices to achieve specific financial goals. Finally, create accountability systems, whether through family commitments, community involvement, or tracking tools, to help maintain your discipline during challenging periods. The beauty of strategic sacrifice is its flexibility. You don't need to adopt every extreme measure to benefit from this approach. Even implementing 1 or 2 strategic sacrifices in your highest expense categories can dramatically accelerate your wealth-building timeline. For instance, choosing to live with roommates for just 3 extra years after college could potentially generate enough savings for a down payment on a property. Committing to cook at home 6 days a week instead of dining out could free up enough capital to max out retirement contributions. Driving an older vehicle for 5 additional years might generate enough savings to launch a side business. The power of strategic sacrifice isn't in the deprivation itself, but in the mathematical advantage it creates. By significantly widening the gap between income and expenses, immigrants create capital that can be deployed into wealth-generating assets years or even decades earlier than their peers who maintain higher living expenses. From success to legacy, creating generational wealth. Building wealth through strategic sacrifice is impressive, but the true hallmark of immigrant financial success isn't measured by the initial fortune. It's found in how effectively that wealth continues working across multiple generations. While 70% of wealthy families lose their fortune by the second generation, many immigrant wealth builders create financial systems designed to thrive for decades, transforming personal achievement into lasting family legacies. Raj and Maria understood something profound. Creating wealth is only half the battle. The more challenging task is ensuring it survives the transition between generations. Their approach to legacy building reveals strategies that anyone can implement, regardless of their starting point. Education stands at the center of Mai's generational wealth strategy. Rather than simply accumulating assets for her children, she established a formal family scholarship fund dedicated to financing higher education for younger relatives. And here, there are more opportunities for them to be successful. Why? Because if they work, they can go to a university, and there are just more opportunities to succeed. Mai explains, echoing the sentiment shared by many immigrant parents who view education as the ultimate pathway to economic stability. The scholarship doesn't just provide tuition, it comes with accountability mechanisms. Recipients must maintain minimum GPA requirements and commit to mentoring the next generation of students. This structure ensures that financial support is tied to achievement and responsibility, creating a virtuous cycle of advancement and knowledge sharing within the family. By institutionalizing education support, Mai transformed what could have been casual financial assistance into a sustainable system that reinforces values while building human capital. Raj took a different approach with his tech consulting firm, focusing intensively on business succession planning. Understanding that most family businesses fail during the leadership transition, he implemented a structured pathway for passing on his company. What makes his approach unique is how systematically he prepared family members for specific roles within the business. Instead of simply assuming relatives would someday take over, Raj created dedicated training programs where interested family members could learn specialized aspects of the business. His nephew started in client services before receiving formal project management training, while his cousin developed expertise in the financial operations. This deliberate skill development ensures that when Raj eventually steps back, qualified family members with deep institutional knowledge will be ready to take the reins, maintaining the business's competitive edge while keeping wealth within the family. Maria's approach to generational wealth leveraged her property portfolio to create distributed income streams. By forming a property investment group with relatives, She not only accelerated their collective wealth-building timeline, but established a structure that ensures financial benefits are shared among multiple family members. This collaborative approach turns real estate into a family enterprise rather than a solo venture. What makes Maria's system particularly effective is how it distributes both responsibility and reward. Each family member involved in the property collective receives income proportional to their contribution and role, creating a self-sustaining economic ecosystem. Properties aren't simply held in one person's name, but structured through legal entities that clearly define ownership percentages and succession plans. This approach ensures that when Maria is no longer around to manage the portfolio, the income-generating machine continues operating smoothly. Beyond these structural approaches, all three wealth builders recognize that financial education, not just assets, determines whether wealth survives across generations. They understood that inherited money without financial literacy typically disappears quickly. My implemented weekly family financial discussions, where everyone from teenagers to grandparents participated in transparent conversations about money management. These weren't just abstract lectures. Family members practiced budgeting with real numbers, learned basic investing principles, and discussed financial news. By normalizing financial conversations, I broke through cultural barriers that often prevent open money discussions in immigrant households. Raj created an interactive financial learning system for younger family members, where earning, saving, and investing were tied to age-appropriate responsibilities. Children as young as 5 earned small amounts through household contributions, learned to divide earnings between spending and saving categories, and gradually progressed to more sophisticated concepts like investment returns as they grew older. This hands-on approach built financial muscles through practical experience rather than theoretical knowledge. Maria's approach to financial education emphasized cultural context. As Isabel Pack, an immigrant and operations manager, notes, different cultures have different attitudes toward money, which can profoundly influence financial management practices. Maria recognized this reality and incorporated financial literacy instruction that acknowledged and built upon her family's cultural background, helping relatives navigate the unfamiliar terrain of the U.S. financial system while respecting their existing financial values. All three wealth builders leveraged what researchers call community cultural wealth, the networks, support systems, and cultural capital that immigrant families possess. Rather than viewing their cultural backgrounds as barriers to financial success, they recognized these elements as unique assets that could be strategically deployed to create educational and economic opportunities. The balancing act between family support and maintaining boundaries represents another critical element of their legacy-building approach. Immigrant wealth builders often face intense pressure to provide financial assistance to extended family, both in America and their countries of origin. Without clear boundaries, these obligations can derail wealth creation and preservation. I established a formal family assistance policy that specified what types of support she would provide, under what circumstances, and with what expectations for repayment or reciprocation. By formalizing these guidelines, she removed the emotional burden of case-by-case decisions while ensuring that assistance aligned with her broader wealth preservation goals. This structure allowed her to be genuinely helpful without undermining her business's financial foundation. Raj implemented a teach-to-fish policy where he would provide educational or business opportunities rather than direct financial support whenever possible. When family members approached him for money to cover expenses, he often offered employment, skill development, or investment opportunities instead, turning potential financial drains into mutual growth opportunities. This approach preserved his capital while empowering relatives to develop their own financial capabilities. Maria's boundary setting took the form of transparent financial agreements. When involving family members in her property investments, she insisted on formal written contracts that clearly spelled out contributions, responsibilities, and financial returns. This professionalization of family financial relationships prevented misunderstandings while protecting the integrity of her wealth-building system. What becomes clear across all these strategies is that generational wealth requires both financial infrastructure and knowledge transfer. Assets without education quickly evaporate, while financial literacy without actual resources remains theoretical. The immigrant approach combines both elements, creating wealth-generating structures while simultaneously building the financial intelligence needed to maintain and grow those structures across generations. the commitment to financial education stands out as particularly crucial. Programs that teach financial literacy, budgeting, saving, understanding credit, and investing have proven essential for breaking cycles of poverty and establishing long-term financial stability. When parents pass on this knowledge, they're transferring more than just assets. They're conveying their five-step immigrant wealth strategy, starting from wherever you are. Financial education breaks the cycle of poverty. But what about building wealth when you're starting with nothing? The secret most financial gurus won't tell you is that you don't need inherited wisdom or family connections to use these powerful wealth-building techniques. The immigrant strategies we've explored aren't just success stories from distant communities. They're practical frameworks anyone can implement today. Let me show you how to apply these same principles to your own financial journey, regardless of your current situation or background. I understand some of you might be thinking, but I don't have the tight-knit community that immigrants rely on, or I need good credit to get ahead in America. These are valid concerns, but the beauty of these strategies is their adaptability. You don't need to replicate exact cultural practices. You just need to understand the underlying principles and adapt them to your circumstances. Let's break this down into 5 actionable steps you can start implementing today. Step 1. Create your own version of a rotating credit association. If traditional banks aren't working for you, it's time to explore alternative funding sources. While you might not have access to a cultural hui or tanda, you can create modern versions that serve the same purpose. Look into peer-to-peer lending platforms that connect borrowers directly with individual lenders, often with more flexible terms than traditional banks. Consider forming a savings circle with trusted friends or colleagues where everyone contributes monthly, and members take turns receiving the pot. For those without established networks, Community Development Financial Institutions, CDFIs, offer a formal alternative. These organizations specifically focus on providing affordable loans and financial education to underserved communities, including those without extensive credit histories. If you're an immigrant without a social security number, research ITIN loans, special financing options designed specifically for your situation that can help you access mortgages, personal loans, and business financing while building credit simultaneously. Step 2. Build your network arbitrage strategy from scratch. You might not have a cultural community to tap into, but you can still create powerful connections in your industry. Start by identifying the specific sectors where you want to build relationships. Then, volunteer for industry events or professional organizations, not just attending, but actively helping organize them. This puts you in contact with established professionals in a context where you're adding value rather than asking for favors. Create online content related to your field to establish expertise and attract connections. This could be LinkedIn articles, YouTube tutorials, or podcast appearances that showcase your knowledge. The key is becoming visible within your target network. Consider starting a meetup group for professionals in your field or related interests. Being the organizer automatically positions you as a connector, giving you legitimate reasons to reach out to potential mentors or partners. Remember that genuine relationship building involves patience and reciprocity. Focus first on how you can help others before seeking assistance for yourself. This approach mirrors the community-first mindset that makes immigrant networks so powerful, even when you're building from zero. Step 3. Explore collective economics opportunities for larger investments. Community land trusts, CLTs, represent an innovative approach to collective property ownership that anyone can access. These organizations provide long-term affordable housing through shared ownership models, making property investment possible even with limited resources. Many CLTs specifically work to help first-time homebuyers navigate the complexities of the housing market while promoting community stability. If traditional CLTs don't exist in your area, consider forming your own investment group with like-minded individuals. Start with clear written agreements outlining everyone's contributions, responsibilities, and exit strategies. Even small-scale collaborative projects like purchasing and renovating a single property can build experience and capital for larger ventures. For business investments, explore cooperative business models where multiple owners share both the investment costs and the operational responsibilities. Worker-owned cooperatives, for instance, allow groups to pool resources and skills to create businesses that benefit all members. Many immigrant communities utilize family investment groups, or community savings clubs to pool resources for larger financial goals. You can adopt this same approach with trusted friends or associates, creating your own collective to pursue shared financial objectives. Step 4. Identify your unique skill arbitrage potential. Everyone has knowledge or perspectives that could be monetized, even if you don't realize it yet. Start by listing all your skills, experiences, and cultural knowledge that others might find valuable. Consider bilingual abilities, cross-cultural understanding, specialized trade skills, or even regional knowledge. Test market demand for these skills through small offerings before making major career changes. This might mean teaching a single class, offering a limited consulting session, or creating a small digital product. Pay attention to which aspects generate the most interest and positive feedback. Once you've identified promising areas, consider how to package your knowledge into higher value offerings. This might include specialized consulting, teaching, content creation, or developing products that leverage your unique insights. For immigrants specifically, organizations like Immigrant Finance offer tailored financial education programs that can help you better understand the U.S. financial system, including budgeting, banking, and tax management. These resources can help you identify which of your skills might be most valuable in your new country. Step 5. Design your strategic sacrifice plan with precise targets. Calculate which temporary hardships will create the biggest returns on your financial journey. Housing typically represents the largest expense for most people. Could you live with roommates or in a smaller space for a defined period? Transportation is often the second largest expense. Could you use public transit, carpool, or drive an older vehicle to free up capital for investments? The key difference between strategic sacrifice and generic frugality is the intentional timeline and specific purpose. Don't just cut expenses randomly. Identify exactly how much you need to save, what you'll use it for, and how long you'll maintain the sacrifice. This creates both purpose and an end date, making the sacrifice psychologically manageable. When implementing your strategic sacrifice plan, focus on high-impact areas rather than depriving yourself of small pleasures. Saving $5 on coffee isn't nearly as impactful as saving $500 monthly on housing or transportation. Also consider the legal implications of your financial strategies, especially regarding informal lending practices, to ensure compliance with financial regulations. Remember that immigrants maintain extraordinary saving rates because they have clear, meaningful goals for their sacrifices. When you establish both timelines and specific targets for your own savings, you can achieve similar results without feeling perpetually deprived. The beautiful thing about these 5 steps is their flexibility. You can implement them regardless of your background, current financial situation, or cultural connections. These strategies work because they're built on universal principles. Community support, even if you have to build that community, creative resource allocation, and a willingness to make strategic short-term sacrifices for long-term gains. The ultimate immigrant wealth secret, turning disadvantages into advantages. The most mind-blowing aspect of immigrant wealth creation isn't just the strategies themselves, but something far more counterintuitive. What if those disadvantages you're trying to overcome are actually your secret weapons? Our 3 wealth heroes discovered that their biggest obstacles became their greatest financial advantages, and their stories reveal how you can do the same. When we look at Mai, Raj, and Maria through the lens of conventional financial wisdom, their success should have been impossible. Every financial advisor, career counselor, and business school professor would have given them the same diagnosis. Your chances of significant wealth creation are slim to none. No connections, limited capital, language barriers, unfamiliarity with American systems. These should have been insurmountable obstacles. But here's where things get interesting. These supposed disadvantages didn't just fail to hold them back. They actually propelled them forward in unexpected ways. Take the concept of the adversity advantage. Research shows that challenges faced by immigrants, like lacking traditional networks, often lead to innovative approaches in business that wouldn't have emerged otherwise. One entrepreneur put it perfectly. The challenges I faced taught me resilience and creativity, which became my greatest assets in building my business. This isn't just feel-good inspiration. It's backed by observable patterns across immigrant success stories. Let's break down how specific disadvantages transform into competitive advantages. Language barriers might seem like a pure handicap, but consider what happens when you can't rely on smooth talking or quick verbal responses. you develop extraordinary listening skills. Mai couldn't afford to misunderstand customer preferences or supplier terms, so she became an exceptional listener. This heightened attention to what customers were actually saying versus what she assumed they wanted, gave her insights that native English speakers often missed. Her food distribution business thrived because she caught subtle shifts in customer demands before her competitors. When restaurant owners mentioned minor frustrations with certain ingredients, Mai would remember and adjust her inventory accordingly. This wasn't a sophisticated market research strategy. It was born from necessity. Because she couldn't afford to lose customers through misunderstandings, she developed a competitive edge in customer service that became the foundation of her business growth. The lack of professional connections might seem like a pure disadvantage, but it forced our wealth heroes to build business models that didn't rely on existing networks. When you can't access traditional opportunities, you're forced to spot gaps that established players have overlooked. This dynamic pushed Raj to identify underserved market segments that larger consulting firms ignored. Since he couldn't compete for mainstream clients initially, he focused on small businesses owned by fellow immigrants who needed tech solutions but felt intimidated by larger firms. This wasn't just a desperate move to find any clients. It became a lucrative niche that larger competitors hadn't recognized as valuable. Raj noticed that many immigrant business owners needed specific technical adaptations to serve their unique customer bases. By addressing these specialized needs, he built a loyal client base that eventually allowed him to expand beyond his initial niche. His supposed disadvantage of lacking connections didn't just lead to a single opportunity. It shaped an entire business model that proved more resilient than many traditional approaches. Perhaps most powerful is how resource constraints transformed into operational advantages. When you start with minimal capital, you can't afford the inefficiencies that many well-funded businesses develop. This forces a level of creativity and efficiency that becomes a significant competitive advantage in the long run. Maria's property business exemplifies this principle perfectly. Without access to large loans or investor capital, she and her family partners had to develop ultra-efficient renovation methods. They couldn't hire contractors for everything, so they developed skills in specific high-value repairs while strategically outsourcing only what was absolutely necessary. Resource constraints often force immigrants to operate more efficiently from day one, creating leaner, more profitable business models. This efficiency becomes particularly valuable in competitive markets, allowing immigrant-owned businesses to maintain profitability even when larger competitors struggle. What initially seemed like a limitation, having to do renovations themselves with minimal budgets, became a massive advantage when market conditions tightened. While competitors who relied on expensive contractors had to scale back operations during economic downturns, Maria's collective could continue growing because their cost structure was fundamentally different. Their disadvantage had transformed into a structural advantage built into their business model. This pattern repeats across countless immigrant success stories. Initial obstacles become the very foundation of long-term advantages when approached with the right mindset. The question isn't whether disadvantages can be overcome. It's how they can be transformed into advantages that others can't easily replicate. So where are our wealth heroes today? Their journeys didn't end with initial success. They've continued evolving their approach to wealth building in fascinating ways. Mai has expanded beyond food distribution into manufacturing, creating specialty food products that capitalize on the growing American interest in authentic global cuisines. Her deep understanding of Vietnamese flavors combined with her American business experience created a unique position in the market that larger food conglomerates struggle to match. She's now exploring international expansion, bringing her products back to Vietnam and other Southeast Asian markets, completing a remarkable full-circle journey. Raj has pivoted his consulting firm towards specialized cybersecurity services for businesses with international operations. His understanding of cross-cultural communication challenges in tech implementation became increasingly valuable as more American companies expanded globally. What started as a necessity, focusing on immigrant business owners, evolved into a specialized expertise that now commands premium rates from Fortune 500 clients operating across multiple countries. Maria has expanded her property collective approach into a formal community investment fund that helps other immigrant families replicate her success. By creating a structured legal framework for collective property investment, she's helping dozens of Families navigate the path she pioneered. What began as a survival strategy has evolved into a wealth-building system that's changing the economic trajectory of entire communities. The most powerful aspect of these continued journeys is how each wealth hero has maintained their adaptive approach. Rather than becoming rigid once they achieved success, they've continued leveraging their unique perspectives to spot opportunities that others miss. Their immigrant advantage didn't disappear with success, it evolved. So what does this mean for you? You don't need to be an immigrant to apply this powerful principle. Everyone has perceived disadvantages that can be reframed as potential advantages. Do you lack formal credentials in your field? That might force you to develop practical skills and real-world results that credentialed competitors lack. Are you starting with minimal capital? That constraint might lead to business models with lower overhead and greater resilience during economic downturns. Do you come from a different background than most people in your industry? That perspective might help you identify overlooked opportunities and solutions. The key insight isn't just to overcome your disadvantages. It's to recognize how they can become your most powerful advantages when approached with the right mindset. Immigrant entrepreneurs frequently report that their unique experiences allow them to identify market gaps and innovate in ways that native-born entrepreneurs simply don't consider. We've explored countless strategies throughout this journey, but what truly matters isn't where you begin. It's the mindset and methods you embrace along the way. Community-based wealth building offers powerful opportunities for everyone. Consider supporting initiatives like community land trusts that provide affordable housing while enabling immigrants to build lasting stability and financial security. As Chris Mercado powerfully noted, there is no growth without discomfort. Not having a safety net might actually be one of the most powerful tools undocumented immigrants have available to them. This perspective captures the essence of turning apparent limitations into catalysts for success. The wealth-building approaches we've discussed transcend cultural boundaries because they're built on universal principles. Leveraging community connections, making strategic sacrifices, and transforming perceived disadvantages into unique strengths. The question now is, what financial challenge in your life is actually your greatest opportunity in disguise? Which disadvantage will you transform